Hello everyone, welcome to Sahitya Academy's Sublime Literature series, and today's program is in English language. Today we are going to discuss new normal, new literary trends. Not only this pandemic, every pandemic disturbs the society as a whole, and it creates what is known as a new set of norms for living. Last time also it affected almost the entire world when it struck the last pandemic. And it, of course, the writers are part of society and it is bound to affect them. In the last episode, we saw literature related to pandemic, how pandemic inspired, pandemic induced literature rather. And it's not only language, almost all languages of India. So today, 3 days ago, World Health Organization also officially declared it is going to take more time to go back to what we know as a normal way of life. So in this condition, in this situation, how literature is going to be produced, how people are going to consume, not only in cities, there are thousands and thousands of writers who are based in small towns, and how rural readers are going to do this. So to discuss this, we have a wonderful panel. Abhishek joins us from Chennai, and Aparna joins us from Bombay, and Meenakshi Thakur from Delhi. So our first panelist is Abhishek Paroi. He's assistant professor in IIT Madras and associate fellow of UK Higher Education Academy. His research interests include memory studies, masculinity studies, and medical humanities. He's author of Postmodern Literatures, published by Orient Black Swan in 2018, and is currently contracted with Rowman & Littlefield for his second book titled Culture and Literary Matter, Metaphor, and Memory. It's a great pleasure to have you, Abhishek, with us today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and our second panelist is Aparna Karthikeyan. She's a storyteller and independent journalist. She's author of non-fiction book, 9 rupees an hour, on the disappearing livelihoods of Tamil Nadu. She volunteers for the People's Archive of Rural India, an initiative of journalist P. Sainath, and has produced texts, articles, photo stories, and video documentaries for it. Since 2005, she writes on culture, books, and travel for the Hindu, the Caravan, the Wire, and other various publications. She has written 2 books for children, Kali Wants to Dance and Cat's Egg, and 3 others with currently will be out soon, probably end of this year. A short fiction has been published in Tuhu and Juggernaut. And it's great to have you, Aparna. Thanks for accepting our invite. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and our third panelist is Meenakshi Thakur. She's a publisher at Westland Publications. He runs an imprint called Eka, which publishes the original books and translations in 9 Indian languages and English. She was with HarperCollins for a decade, where she set up Hindi publishing program and ran English translation imprint, Harper Perennial. Oh, that's one of the most significant publications. They brought out wonderful, wonderful books. She's a bilingual poet and novelist as well. Her collection of Hindi poems, Neend Ka Akhri Poem, was shortlisted for Sahitya Academy's Yuva Puraskar way back in 2012. And her first novel, Lovers Like You and I, was shortlisted for Thibaut Jones South Asia Prize. And it's wonderful to have you with us, Meenakshi. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So first we will start with Abhishek. First initial impression, initial thought on this topic.
Right, thank you. Pleasure to be here and to share a panel with such wonderful panelists. I look forward to learning a lot from the session as well. So just as a preamble to the topic, the new normal and what can literature offer in terms of trends in the new normal. Well, I'll just go back to the fundamentals. I mean, how do you define what literature is? And what is a unique perspective that literature can offer in terms of a pandemic such as this, when we have a collective crisis such as COVID-19? Why should we go to literature at all? I mean, what solace can we get from literature? What perspective can we get from literature? Now, the book that I'm writing at the moment, which is very kindly mentioned It's titled Culture and the Literary, Matter, Metaphor, and Memory. So I'm actually looking at how matter becomes metaphors. What is the entire idea of a metaphor? And how do you produce and consume metaphor? Right. So what is the politics behind which a certain matter, certain material becomes metaphorical and then enters the realm of memory? So hence it's matter, metaphor, and memory. So for example, COVID-19 is almost a metaphor now, a metaphor of dystopian state, something which collectively, we're suffering collectively across the world. So it's already metaphorical, and obviously it is already very much a part of collective memory, right? So what can literature do in terms of tapping into this? So my working definition of literature or fiction, and I'm so glad we have some wonderful writers in this panel as well. I'm sure they can throw more light on this subsequently. I look at literature as a production of possibilities. The whole idea of fiction as a production of possibilities, something which sort of inhabits the realm between reality and fantasy. Right? It's not entirely real. It's not like completely real, but it's not entirely fantastic either. It has a liminal quality, and I'm very interested in the idea of liminality, the threshold quality between reality and fantasy. So I think literature, my work in definite literature is a production of possibilities, which are liminal in quality. And I think, especially given the times we are in at the moment, COVID-19, the whole idea of the public world and the private world is disappearing, right? So our private world is the public world, and the public world is the private world. I mean, we are consuming a public reality through our cell phones, through our mobile phones, our internet, etc., because our access to the public world has been interrupted, perhaps permanently, right? So all of us have suffered a sense of cognitive interruption, a cognitive existential interruption in our understanding of reality, in our understanding of public space, in our understanding of the shared public space. So because, social distancing and alienation is not necessarily a bad thing anymore. It is something which has become the norm, and that is the new norm. We need to alienate ourselves, right? So I think at this particular point of time, where alienation is part of the public sphere, alienation is part of the access to public sphere, literature can actually come in with this whole idea of liminality, which has always been the business of literature, the production of liminality, the production between the inside and the outside. So I think that is the perspective that we can really take in terms of our understanding of this particular crisis. And I look forward to hearing the other panelists as well about this.
Yeah, Meenakshi, your initial thought on this?
Well, publishing, like any other industry, publishing is also going through. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So, too has had a setback in the last 3-4 months, and it's surely going to change the way we consume stories or sell stories. The way stories are written and read will change. Give you a small example. All the warehouses we were not able to print the books, and the bookstores were shut. So online sales of ebook sales went up considerably. And we also saw that the kind of books, the genres that are being read, so the sale of the genres that went up now were not doing so 6 months back. So the kind of stories that were being read was not so much serious non-fiction, which sells more in India, more than fiction. People were reading more fiction, more historical fiction, more crime, books that would help them escape this situation for a bit. That would give them some kind of relief. So in that sense, what consuming the content, stories that people are consuming, has changed in a very significant way in the last few months. That's one. And in the coming days, I think a different kind of writing will emerge from this. Hoping people will lessons and remember them in the post-COVID world and write differently, because it has to. The purpose is eventually to show the reader a new way of life or a different way of life. That's what I.
Yeah. Aparna?
Thank you for having me. It is just lovely to be here with a great panel. So I work in this intersection of livelihood and culture. And I can tell you that we've seen an enormous disruption in both this, especially in rural India. I follow rural Tamil Nadu closely. And I can tell you that many of the livelihoods that, which have obviously seen, a lot of dips, even in the course of a normal year, have been crushed, have really been crushed. Anything to do in the art world has been enormously crushed. We have spoken about migrants as if we never knew that they existed in India before the, people started walking back to their villages from the cities where they were. I think the really invisibilized workforce, the people who were keeping the cities, alive, and literally holding the cities up in their hands and their shoulders. And when all of them started walking back, and we were like so shocked at this complete, where are people coming from? And many of my colleagues in Pari, they wrote poems about it, and one of them had written a poem where she spoke about people putting, something into an anthill, and then you have ants coming out. It was like a pouring, right? I mean, we're really destroying people's lives and livelihoods. And for the first time, we really saw up close and front how terrible that destruction is. So we've made it impossible for people to live in villages because there are no jobs there. People move to the cities. And when they live in cities, they have like an alternate existence, which is very different from my privileged life and many of our privileged lives, in our, societies, in our gated communities and all of this. And then you have these people who have been gently, quietly shouldering the entire city and the entire, I think even the urban economy, keeping the wheels running. And all of them have had to go back home because that's the only place they felt safe, and many of them in many of the interviews, they've said that if I die, I want to die at home, in the company of my people. So I think the pandemic has actually shown us, what the reality is in the lives of so many people. And if I think this is possibly going to happen, there might be a whole host of literature, whether it's non-fiction or fiction, as Abhishek also said that very beautifully, in that space between reality and imagination, maybe some of the, the real stories which can be adapted to fiction. I'd really like to read about the real India, the India that is right under my nose in front of me, which I do not engage with on a daily basis unless I go in search of a story. That's the kind of literature I think will come out. And I think, as Meenakshi says, there has been a complete disruption in what people have been reading and what people do want to read. And I hope we engage more with the post-pandemic world, which I think will show us an India or hold a mirror up to an India that we have been oblivious to.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's both Meenakshi said and this kind of a thing. Actually, on the one hand, the recording all these things in literature, either in the form of stories or poetry, whatever it is. One question is how people coming after 10 years, how they are going to relate to it. And what is the purpose of recording all these things? Maybe it's just sharing your own impressions, how a writer may want to, they may use it as a catharsis, a tool, just to throw it back, throw it out of the system. They are affected, like Aparna was telling, that how it is disturbing to see all these people walking back. Okay, as a writer, a person gets, emotionally affected by that, and then they may use it as in the terms of novel or stories. On the other hand, we also see, like a very interesting post I read, how Parsi English literature, English writing in Parsi, is how it evolved out of this pandemic. It is truly a pandemic-induced literature in India is one. I mean, like as a genre, we can have, of course, we have Tagore writing about his stories of Sharat Chandra, and then Thakazhi Sivashankara Pillai in Malayalam. So many people have written about it, but nothing like this as a movement, as a whole. So many women took to writing in English after 1921. So Abhishek, where do you see? I mean, like, as an academician, where do you see? For example, it is definitely going to affect what kind of how books are going to be produced, taking from Meenakshi for academic purposes. Obviously, most of the institutions are going to go online now.
Yes.
So what kind of how books are going to be produced, and how students are going to consume this kind of literature, educational literature.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating listening to Meenakshi and Aparna in terms of how there's been a paradigm shift, shall we say, in terms of our consumption and production of knowledge. The way knowledge is produced through books, through text, and that has suffered perhaps a permanent paradigm shift. And also that affects the way we consume knowledge, we consume reality. And just to give a personal anecdote, I mean, I spent the entirety of the last couple of days interviewing PhD students for IIT Madras. And the entire thing is online now. So everyone is a virtual space, people coming in and getting out. And a large part of the quality of the interview depends on your internet connection. So the internet connection is bad. If you're somewhere in a rural part of India, that obviously puts you in an adverse position in terms of your performance in the interview. So leaving that logistics thing aside, leaving this politics of privilege aside, if I just go with the research question, I mean, I can tell you very frankly, 6 out of 10 candidates now want to work on pandemic literature, right?
Wow.
And that is a new movement. It has already started. I mean, people are already writing papers, books have been produced. I mean, I can mention a culture theorist, Slavoj Žižek, who's already written a book on COVID-19. And I'm sure there are many in the pipeline, right? So what I feel, again, to go back to the fundamental definition of literature, my idea of literature is got more to do with affective writing rather than effective writing. The way literature deals with affect, sentiments, moods, and the whole production of affect, the architectural effect the literature can produce is something which obviously makes a piece of writing literary. I mean, if I were to say to someone, let us go for a walk, it's a nice sky, so we'll enjoy it, that's one way of saying it. But if I were to put it, let us go then you and I, when the evening is up against the sky, like a patient eats rice upon a table. So what I'm doing is, I'm essentially making it affective by defamiliarizing it. And this is the key point that I'm interested in, defamiliarization. Your familiar reality is being defamiliarized, perhaps through an accident. And this is why literature is so interesting, even in medical humanities. When you look at trauma literature, for example. So even doctors today are looking at fiction in terms of understanding how a trauma patient suffers a particular crisis, because that is the whole business of affective writing. Right? So my personal view is literature will perhaps become more effective. And this being effective is not the ontological opposite of social. If the social has become effective, right? The social has become interiorized. So the entire idea of social realities become an affective understanding. So I think the whole idea of the literature, the move towards effect, is probably going to be more political and more social in this quality.
Okay. That is, that's, we'll come to that later. That Aparna, you worked in rural areas. I know there are many languages in India, writers are living in small towns and rural. Poets, critics, translators, they're working. And now it is going to be, as just Abhishek just mentioned, it is going to be a paradigm shift for them, more of a paradigm shift for them. And they are the ones who are socially affected. And how do you see, how do you think, how they are going to produce literary pieces, their own creations, how they are going to create now?
So if you look at it, what I think is every person's experience becomes some kind of a journalistic documentation of what is happening. So, for example, some of my friends were talking about the migrant crisis. They were looking at migrants from, I think it was Orissa or Chhattisgarh, who were, caught in another part of the country. They made videos of, their conditions in those, migrant so-called camps that were there, and somewhat, subhuman conditions that they were, provided with. I think that is some kind of a bedrock on which literature can be built. Now, who's going to tell these stories is going to be the big thing. So if I go there and tell the stories, I mean, is that a fair thing? I mean, like, it's not my experience. So how does it play out if I go there and, tell somebody else's story? I think enabling people to tell their own stories, that is going to be the best way forward, because I think the experiences have been quite brutal and very deep. The little I've spoken to people, like, for example, a flower seller in a tiny little village near Madurai. She has raised those flowers, with so much, those plants, the tuberose plants, with so much of, difficulty throughout the year, for that one small window where she's going to make a bumper harvest and a lot of money. That entire time was like completely gone because, the markets had collapsed. So if this woman were to come there and tell her story, it would be phenomenal. I mean, we'll get a window to a world that we do not know at all. As far as writers who are living in rural India, I think they're already producing some fantastic pieces of literature. I mean, as far as I know, Perumal Murugan is at it. He's said, in one of his interviews, he's spoken about the number of books and, short stories and short stories. I think he's written and poems too. I know for sure that Chodharman sir has also been writing. So yes, the writers have been at it. I mean, they have been, producing works of literature. And I also know that small bookshops in rural Tamil Nadu, I'm only familiar with Tamil Nadu, have been conducting online literary meets. There is one called Palam Bookstore in Salem, which is not rural as such, but, semi-urban, I think I would say, a town. So they've been having these, book meets where every week they have somebody coming in online and then, discussing a book. So I think literature as such is, alive and kicking, so to speak, but how these works are going to be produced obviously, in the old fashioned book format, or is it, are we going to see a shift to the digital? Because a lot of people have embraced the digital, way of consuming and producing at this point. Is it going to be literature that is, written in words, or are we looking at forms of storytelling which go beyond words, because now everybody has a smartphone.
Yeah.
That is going to be, I think, for me, very interesting to see if there is a shift in the way we tell stories. Are we going to use videos more? Are we going to use, first person recording, people, life experiences and putting it out? I think TikTok, when it was there, it would be a fast stretch to call it a, storytelling, but I think it was a great way of people expressing themselves. And as we know that, many of it were coming from very underprivileged, marginalized backgrounds. People were becoming TikTok stars because they had enormous talent and finally they had a way of expressing themselves. So if we give people the tools, I think we can, expect to see extraordinary storytelling of first person experience.
Okay. Meenakshi, am I audible?
Yes, too. I just switched off my video because my network is
issues.
bad.
Yeah, no issues. Now, this, that one of the things which came up in this discussion in this round is that, like, Amitav Ghosh very aptly put it. Get ready for flood of pandemic novels. Okay. Now there's a distinction between 1918 and 2020. Now in 1918 to 20, when the pandemic, every pandemic lasts for 5 years, 4 to 5 years. So when it came, all the literature, at least 90% of pandemic-related literature, that came after 1921 or after that. Okay, now everybody has got, even Aparna was referring to digital, everybody going online. Now, the thing is, what about the quality of it? Especially now with the equivalent of TikTok, we have flash fiction. So how, as a publisher, how are you going to, is this going to become a normal now? That everybody wants to write, they have a tool, blog, something they are going to put up, and then, we have visual stories that is also coming up now. Yeah, Meenakshi.
Rajpur, this hasn't much. Can you? Is my voice echoing?
No, you're breaking. That's all. Please go ahead.
With Democrat was and yes, we will still continue to books. We slowed down But by next year, we hope.
I think she is inaudible.
It works.
I think
you can't hear me?
Yeah. I think your internet is feeble or something like that, disturbed. Maybe we'll wait for that signal to return. So your voice is completely broken. We are unable to see. Okay, Abhishek, now come to let Meenakshi come back. And then in the meanwhile, what is that? Who is going to regulate all this? Okay, as a publisher, they may see the chance, but who is going to regulate all these things? Now, Amitabh Ghosh is correct. We are going to see a flood of it. But here earlier we had people who are busy safeguarding their lives, okay, remembering everything, getting affected, and then came out of it and then wrote, including Ahmad Ali. Not that he sat there in 1918 and 1919 and wrote that Delhi is becoming a graveyard. No, he had to wait for it. Sarath Chandra waited for all these things, and he wrote how village after village after village is getting wiped out. Then it's not something which, when you are in the midst of something and thousands and thousands are going to pour, who is going to regulate all this? What is the quality of the content?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting situation to be in, because as you correctly pointed out, there's an immediacy about the storytelling. It is happening at the moment, even as you speak. So we have perhaps for the first time in human history, the storytelling and experiencing happening simultaneously. And because we have all these digital platforms, it is perfectly possible for people to experience something and tell a story almost simultaneously. So I can tell something that's happening to me through a photograph, which I can post on Facebook and the social media. So that critical clinical distance between experience and storytelling, that has perhaps disappeared. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Time will tell perhaps in terms of what, in terms of quality. But I think it's interesting to get this immediate perspective, this alive cognitive perspective as something which is immersive, your immersive experience, even as you're storytelling. And I think as Aparna was pointing out very, very fascinatingly, the whole idea of the embodied experience of migration, of moving from a place, going back to home. I mean, you actually become stories in some sense, right? So the human body is becoming the story. I mean, the illness is becoming the story. And because this kind of an experience can be very immediately and quickly projected in social media, we have perhaps a new ontology of storytelling, which has never happened before. I mean, in terms of the immediacy, the quickness, the experientiality. So the moment between production and consumption has disappeared, I think, in terms of the storytelling has evolved. And that, I think, is an interesting thing to see in the foreseeable future.
Oh, okay, yeah, I mean, like that, Aparna, that if you recall that maybe 10, 15 days ago, Pico Iyer gave an interview to Samanth. Okay, now in that, one of the things which Abhishek is mentioning was the underlying tone of that, because he talked about the moving between Tokyo and Los Angeles and how it is, yeah. But basically that immediacy of experience, yeah, that is okay, that's fine. Yeah, all of poems I'm seeing, flash fiction I'm seeing, all that they need to do is 800 words or 600 words, and then they just pass it on. But my point is, when you wait for something, you get a very highly, whether it's education material or philosophy or any kind of a novel or anything. So when you live with it, okay, something happens, I immediately try to express. Maybe it's instant gratification. This is the world of instant gratification, of course. But when we assimilate that what we experience, digest it, process it inside our brain, and then express it, that's a different dimension altogether. Yeah, both the things are very valid. But I'm not saying that, yeah, sometimes we get a very good quality in a kind of a pandemic poems. Recently, it's written in Odia. I saw that some are written in Tamil, some are written in Hindi. Yeah, of course, flash fiction is a little bit more, 1,000 words, and then they are doing it. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, is this going to become a norm? Are we going to give away that, okay, like Rudyard Kipling, that old order, give it away. That it moves, it is gone.
I mean, my thought actually is there in one of the words that you said, sir. You spoke about process, and I think to me, everything lies there. So, when Sainath always talks to us about this one thing, he talks about our response to events, and he talks about our response to processes. If you look at what's happening now in the whole, post-COVID, or, I think we can't call it post-COVID yet, right? I mean, I don't think we'll be able to call that, maybe until 2022 or 23 or whatever. So if you look at this time, as the events are unraveling, as Abhishek very rightly said, this whole immediacy that's being, captured and told as stories, that has a certain quality, it has a certain importance. But if you're going to look at what happened, for example, to public health, which has been, we have been living in this, ideal world where private healthcare has, kept all of us, in a very, we felt very safe by this whole, private healthcare and never really questioned it. For the first time, we've had to look at public healthcare. We are as strong as the weakest of us are, right? I mean, whether it is how a city is built or how, public health across the country is. I think we have started questioning these things. And I think, as you said, the best work will come when we have gone through this and we know where we have failed, and, works of, whether it is non-fiction, whether it is works of fiction, whatever it is in response to the whole pandemic, what happened before the pandemic that made our responses and, experiences during the pandemic as terrible, I think, as it has been, I think that will be very important to have. And I think that's going to be, it's also going to be like a, a lens through which we're going to see our world, right? For me, one of the things is like, how we build cities. This whole terrible thing of like, moving people from villages to cities and saying that they have a better quality. In fact, people have told me that they have a better quality of life in Bombay because there is always pani and there is always bijli. People have actually said that, okay? Because in the villages, you don't get these two. There's no assurance of these two. But in a chawl in Bombay, you have pani, you have bijli. But you don't have space. You don't have, access to good health. The first time when people were counting the number of toilets that are there for the public in Bombay was during the pandemic, when the, COVID went into the slums. And then people had to say, oh, there's one toilet seat for 200 people. And all this, we will know the fallout of, all these things that we have built up in the name of, I think, across the world, the kind of things that has happened, urbanization or like, public funding, cuts in public funding and, public health funding and, the fallouts of all that. I think if all that is looked at very carefully, I think we're looking at like, phenomenal, literature that's really going to help us go forward. I think it will change the way we think at the see the world and what we call as development. Quite possibly what we have enjoyed as development. I think what some of us have definitely greatly benefited from.
Yeah, that you mean what you're saying is, yeah, I mean, of course, to put it in one line, without public health, material economic progress is not possible. When the public, entire thing, everybody is getting affected, obviously you will not be, it's not possible. It is not possible at all. You can't have anything. So this is what Abhishek was telling. When the matter becomes a metaphor, you see all these things, then it becomes a memory. So basically, Abhishek, that one of the things is that how much of impact it will have on the people, readers. But like, I mean, obviously the way in which they are going to read it is going to change. I mean, I was referring to people are going to convert ebooks. Well, how many, maybe we have 130 crore population, how many people can have access to electronic books? Yeah, people is very easy to say people have smartphones. Most of the smartphones are terrible and networks are pathetic. So in what as an education, I mean, you're in the field of education also. So how it is going to, I mean, really impact them as a student, as a reader of novels, history, anything?
Yes. Yeah. If I could just go back to the earlier point a little bit and then come to this, because I think these are connected points. I think part of the knee-jerk production of literature that is happening today has also got to do with the real fear of not being alive. So, there's a possibility that I'm going to die. So there'll be no point for processing later. So the only way I can produce and archive my experience is by capturing the immediate moment. right? So that in a way becomes a certain mode of production, because I'm not sure if COVID's going to infect me 2 weeks from now. So I won't have the processing time later in terms of, thinking about it and then producing it. Now, what that also does, and that this connects to the question that we have right now, one of the things I'm interested in as a researcher is the politics of contagion. Now, in a very real sense, buying a book which is physical in quality, touching something which has perhaps been touched by someone else before, by a bookseller, by a printer, by someone who found it perhaps. I mean, that is a very real fear in some sense. So in some sense, the move towards the ebook might be, again, a move from the position of vulnerability, not just from the position of capturing knowledge or consuming knowledge. That's the only way that I can safely consume knowledge, perhaps, by not touching it. And again, this non-tactile mode of production, the non-contagious mode of production, is perhaps the way forward. I mean, this is probably, perhaps, again, it's a very real fear, and it's connected to what I just said. But the only way I can produce literature now is by capturing at the moment, because I'm not sure of the next moment, because everyone's getting affected. Amitabh Bachchan's getting affected. So the whole politics of social privilege is breaking. And as Aparna was pointing out, this is perhaps that moment in human history where vulnerability becomes a collective condition. Right? It's a shared condition. It breaks, it undercuts the entire politics of privilege, class, money. Everyone can be affected. So in a very perverse sense, this is sort of democratized vulnerability in some sense. And this democratization of vulnerability is perhaps what is causing this knee-jerk production of literature, and also the fear of contagion, which is the reason why perhaps ebook is the only safe mode of consumption. So I'm speaking from the position of academics, of course, but also because I work in cognition and I work in contagion. I'm very interested in contagion. How does fear spread? Through materials, through metaphors, through rumors, the whole politics of rumors and gossip, which may or may not be true. And the book as a physical form of knowledge, I think is going to suffer perhaps one of the biggest setbacks in the history of books, perhaps. And the ebooks might be the non-contagious form of production. So again, I'm speaking in a position of real fear and real vulnerability.
Okay. So, I mean, maybe it looks like Meenakshi is having a very bad internet. So probably the next episode of this pandemic, she can come. Anyway, so this one of the things, like, he is referring to ebooks. Are we going to, so maybe 5 years ago, Pew was doing a research. They conducted a survey across the globe in different countries, what kind of a mode, how people are going to produce and consume literature. Okay, now they said 10%, just 10% of the reader, they want to shift. They have already shifted to electronic mode of reading. Okay. Now that's very interesting. And one of the things they said that in Japan at the time, in 2015, people are trying to make what is called interface publication. Okay, it will be a physical book, as well as you will have videos, audio, and everything. So that kind of, it didn't go much. Probably then we had so many other disturbances in 17, 18, and then now they are earthquakes. So many things happen. So you also mentioned that people, they have been like TikTok, and then flash fiction. Maybe they become they become popular, and for some of the reasons which Abhishek also mentioned. And what do you think? Where the readers, like Abhishek has pointed out, has given his thoughts. Where do you think, how much normal it is going for to be a reader for purchase any kind of book?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm asking you. Yeah.
Okay. So I think I belong to that old school where I'm very physical book friendly, and I know quite a few people who have actually bought books when they have started being available, and then kept them for the cool off period of a few days or whatever it is, and then picked it up and read it. And I think if you look at Tamil fiction or Tamil book world, I think it's very, very popular. The physical book is still extremely popular. And yes, of course, there is a lot of consumption in the online space. Kindle books, yes, absolutely. But as far as I know, the shift has been slightly slower is what I think. And I think there has also been kind of disruption in people's reading habits, as Meenakshi was talking about, like, some time back, about what people are reading and, how much, even how much they're reading. I have seen post after post after post on Twitter and people saying, I will give you 5 tips to get back to reading. I will tell you what book you can take so that, you actually finish the book. Because even I've done that. I've taken on an author who I've really loved before, and I've, been able to read it at one sitting. I'm not able to now. Your mind wanders, as Abhishek was saying, you're thinking about morbid thoughts. It's not just about you, it's about people you love. So in this mode, it's very hard to actually escape and go into a realm where you are with another set of characters, empathizing, and then you see certain situations, let's say in a book, you're not able to empathize because your immediate experience is so powerful, and it's so unlike anything that's happened in history. I mean, yes, the 1918 pandemic happened, but I don't think the world was connected in the way that it has been connected now, right? I mean, we thought if one flight was cancelled, the world would come to an end, and now we've not had flights in 4 months, and we are going on. So I think, I don't know how the shift in reading habits is going to go, but I think people are struggling to read, to be very honest. It's okay if it's maybe that's why flash fiction is popular, sir. I mean, I think it's a smaller bite-sized.
No, it's not only flash fiction. Personally, forget, you have some profession. Abhishek may work somewhere. I may be working somewhere. Personally also, maybe, last year, what we would have think, I want to capture the voices of people. What I would have done is probably gone around and collected stories, put them on a paper or typed it somewhere and then given to the publication. Now, what I'm doing for the personal level, I'm doing online kind of a discussion chat. I'm capturing the voices of people and broadcasting, just ordinary people like us. So I'm not going to famous people. So what I feel is that, Abhishek, that maybe even electronic books, what I'm trying to say is that visual medium may become path for the future. Like, every pandemic gives opportunity, hope. Not that every pandemic is, what do you say? You use the word morbid. Well, I can give a very famous example how this kind of a pandemic-induced isolation leads to creativity. The biggest example is Isaac Newton. For 18 months, he was in isolation. The 4 laws, because of which all this technology that we are using, the best book by a long distance, Principia, came out of that period of 18 months in 1665 and 1667. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe this pandemic may give rise to something altogether new. What do you say, Abhishek?
Yes, I definitely hope that happens. I definitely hope we have a new order of narration, a new order of knowledge emerging out of it. Because, if you use Newton's saying, every action has a reaction. So there's the crisis happening collectively. So perhaps we'll have some phenomenal creativity out of it. But, what we don't know at this moment, of course, is how the creativity is going to take place, whether it's going to be a familiar medium for us, or perhaps we have a new medium altogether. Right. Something like cinema might come out. Something entirely new. Because at the moment we're experimenting, we're confused. And one of the terms which I use very much in my academic writing is entanglement. So one of the conditions of entanglement is everything is mixed very asymmetrically. Right. We don't quite know which way everything is going. But every entanglement can produce a new ontology of knowledge, a new ontology of narration, perhaps. For example, who would have thought cinema would become this instrument of narration? When it first came into being, people were experimenting with different kinds of photographs, cinematograph. It took a long time for cinema to really become the instrument. And ironically, it became a big thing after the World Wars.
Yeah.
The camera techniques used in those wars, those were domesticated later. And then cinema became a domesticated industry in its own right. So what I'm hopeful about, and maybe hopeful is too strong a word, is maybe a new medium might emerge out of this pandemic. That's definitely something that I would want to see as a consumer of knowledge, as a lover of knowledge, a lover of literature. Perhaps we have a new genre, a new medium, a new technology entirely, which will combine everything together: literature, cinema, voices, disembodied voices, immersive technology. Maybe everything will come together and produce something beautiful and sublime. That's definitely my hope.
Yeah, because it's very interesting point. I mean, okay, Abhishek taken it a little further. What I observed, Aparna, that recently, maybe 10 days ago or 15 days ago, a particular tweet went viral where a small town teacher in Kerala is using augmented reality that you cannot get even by an e-book or normal book. A person can see everything. I mean, like a student, maybe class 5, class 10 student, they can do this. That is what I'm trying to say, that I am collecting stories through Zoom or Zoho or anything. So what I'm doing is I'm putting all of them together. Same way, teachers also, their literature, the way in which education literature will change, like Abhishek was telling, new medium altogether. Same way, maybe novel will use, novelists may use. That is why in Japan, 5 years ago, they were trying to do that. It will have augmented reality will become part of everyday life. So what do you say, Aparna? Quickly.
Everyday life is, I think, the key. I think everyday people, writing about their everyday lives and how it was disrupted by this, that would be the thing that, I really want to see. And not just me going and recording it or somebody else going and recording it, but people recording their own lives using whatever medium. I think, as you very rightly said, now the options are endless. Maybe we'll have new technology coming in that combines, very different ways of disseminating these stories. I mean, it would be fascinating. And I think that will be the ultimate record of, what's happened to people's lives at this point, what they have thought, what they have felt, how they were deprived, how they were enriched, if that also happened. All of that, I'd like to see it. And I think the augmented AI example was like, brilliant, because I would love to be in that classroom, where she's bringing in fantastic creatures right in there.
Well, another point is, okay, as an educationist, as a teacher, and as a Abhishek should be prepared for this. My point is that, and as a writer, when everything, medium of expression is going to change in the world, in the classroom, as well as in the real world. So as a writer, you have to be ready. As a publisher, Meenakshi or somebody else, they have to be ready. They have to be one step ahead of everybody else.
Can I come in here, Rajmo?
Yeah, please.
Can you hear me, or is there a lot of echo?
No, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that I've been looking at Instagram handles and YouTube, what people are reading, or a lot of classics have been revived on YouTube because people are, the elderly especially, are listening to Premchand being read. And all of that is coming for free. They're reading, they're listening to Bashir, they're listening to, and these are all people, general people living in their houses, reading out from their books and recording it. So I think from this, there is another kind of oral storytelling, which will emerge on your phone. You will be able to listen to new stories on your phone. If there people are listening to old stories, there will be people who will talk about the pandemic and tell the stories in their own voices. There will be short stories, I think, because that's the attention span we have these days. Most people are just busy looking at shows, series, and web series, and not reading so much. Audiobooks, the sales will go up. That is my sense. And augmented reality, you mentioned, countries, Southeast Asian countries are pursuing this very seriously. Especially in Singapore, they've converted a lot of children's books into AR books. Kindle had started this project called Kindle in Motion on the device Kindle Fire. It didn't really take off. They did a set of books, but maybe that's also one way of producing stories.
Yeah, I mean,
and as writers, we have to be flexible because storytelling has been democratized. The pandemic has been a great leveler. And stories will be produced on multiple formats in many lengths, in many different lengths. So we'll also have to be willing to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, she's right. Meenakshi is right. And then we already have my friend Kazaralt on Twitter. He has been doing Zine audio, wonderful stories. And like what she said, rightly said, many people are already started listening to the classics audio is one, but this kind of artificial intelligence enabled medium, I feel that also will become a new literary trend. So we have only 3 minutes left. Quickly, first Abhishek, final one quick word from you.
Well, I think we're hardwired to be optimistic. I can only be optimistic standing here. I definitely hope a new medium of expression emerges, which is more democratic, more innovative, and more inclusive. That is my hope, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Aparna.
I think I'll have to echo whatever Abhishek said. I'm really looking forward to seeing and hearing and, listening to multitude of voices. And I'm hoping that will come from, everywhere in the country, and that, I won't feel that, experiences are alien just because, I haven't experienced them. So.
Okay. Meenakshi?
I'm hoping that writing will not just come from a place of privilege. It'll come from where the real stories lie, which happens in the languages that we publish in all the Indian languages. And I'm hoping a lot of poetry will emerge from it. That's my personal favorite.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Meenakshi, Abhishek, and Aparna. Means very sad that Meenakshi could not join this episode 2 in a full time. So maybe in episode 3 she can join. And thank you every one of you. Thank you very much. And all the viewers from around the world, please continue to watch Sahitya Academy programs in all the languages, all the 24 languages. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.